I've got 20 minutes to tell you everything about the index, which I could spend about 3 days at least talking about it. But what I wanted to do is to build exactly on what we've seen over the last 3 years to see what are we seeing now and where we're going. And my passion really is, how do we embed change? We've got awareness, but how do we actually have a lasting impact that we can really be more neuro-inclusive? So the report, this is the third, and I think there was and the team at City and Guild's been fantastic, because it doesn't happen with one person. It's lots of people thinking about getting enthusiasm, getting people to engage, emailing out to people, please complete it, encouraging people. And this year was very much around building on what we've learned over the last couple of years and thinking about where are we going, where are the places where we're not having change happening. What do we really need to think about? And I'm going to just pick up on a few headlines in it. Over the next 6-9 months, I will share more, because in a report we compact it, and there's stories of people that have told and themes that have come out, and we can continue this conversation and think about next year, what do we want to do? So change is happening slowly. It is happening. We've got awareness. There's no doubt about that. You've got something in The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph. Somebody just contacted me now about ADHD. Everybody's got it, whatever that means, you know. So we've got increasing awareness, which is great. But if it doesn't translate into action, then what we've got is expectation without intervention or support. And I think that's really important. So change is happening, there is increased awareness, but we need to translate it clearly into business as usual. It's what we do in the skin of everything we do, because unless we do, managers won't support individuals, because the much as everybody wants to and the intent is good, if I've got to think about what do I need to do with this person, what do I need to do with this person, it's not going to happen, because everybody's busy doing their day jobs. You know, it just doesn't come to the surface. So what have we got from the report this year? That employers' barriers, so I'm going to look at it from employers and employees, and I think this is really important in the index, because we listen to hundreds and hundreds of people who are neurodivergent and listen to their stories, and we're listening to what employers are saying as well. And it's interesting to get that comparison of the two, of we perceive we're doing things well. You know, I asked somebody the other day, how confident are you supporting people? And I put something on LinkedIn as well about this. And there was like managers, and there was a high level of, I'm very confident. And that caused me huge concern, right? Because confidence doesn't always translate into competence, does it, right? So, you know, I was in training yesterday and somebody said they were 10 out of 10 confident in supporting people. I was just saying this before and I was thinking, I'm really worried now, right? So employers' barriers to neuro-inclusion are 39% lack of knowledge. So we've got a way to go to get the language, and the language is changing all the time. We've talked about neurodiversity and neuro-inclusion. I hear adders and orders and neurospicy and neurodifferences and neurotypes and neurominorities, right? So this makes it hard to have some conversations, because people are worried about what's right, what's wrong, rather than having a conversation. 30% are focusing on other priorities. Employers are running businesses, and the business is to run the business, right? And we mustn't forget that. People employ people to do jobs, right? And I think that's really important. We don't lose sight of that. You're supporting somebody to do their job, which is really important. And 25% they were worried about the cost. The good news is that the cost is often low cost, no cost. It's attitudinal, really, it's communication. It's the stuff that we can weave into everything we do, you know. And I think that's where we have to go in the next year, really, is how do we weave that in? Stating a commitment. We've got people starting to put a neurodiversity policy. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I think it's good that they're saying it's important to consider this. Do we need just to have an inclusive approach to recruitment? But we're seeing that happening. 59% of respondents hadn't, and I snuck this in this year because I was interested, right, about health and safety, because I don't think people talk about health and safety in the context of neurodiversity. And I mean, Jenny's from Heathrow here this morning, we talk about that a lot, don't we? Because if you can imagine, if you're somebody who's dyspraxic going up a ladder, or you're in catering and you're carrying a tray, or you're doing a number of different things, I don't think we think about the risks. And there is a Health and Safety Act as well as an Equality Act. So I did sneak that in this year. Okay? So who's having training? Well, I think the interesting thing is we're getting it starting to be at senior leadership. We're only starting, we're hearing that voice that managers need more training, managers need more training. I want to question, what do they need training in? Because I don't think they need training in ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. I really don't. I think it's not the way to go, because I think what it does is cause confusion, because lots of people don't have any diagnoses. Lots of people have lots of diagnoses and lots of labels, so how are you supposed to support them? So we're seeing that senior leadership, we've got to start at the top of organisations, and we're seeing that happen. We've got to get buy-in, because this is important. So training's still siloed and favours some conditions over others. I like the Cinderellas of the neurodevelopmental world, I really do, because developmental language disorder 4 times more common than autism. But people go, what's DLD, right? 75% of youth offenders have a communication disorder, yet we talk about autism and ADHD. Not that the one is more important or less important, but if we go, this is more important than that, that's a problem, yeah? And so I think it's really important, and they all overlap all the time, right? And so the diagnosis you get is only what's available to you, the door you can go through. So we're still seeing this training as siloed. It's not that you don't want to give people information, but if we overload managers with that information, we're going to end up with, like, what have you got? So then I'll get ADHD fidget toys, and then autism headphones, and dyslexia beige paper. We'll end up with that, right? Which is rather, let's have a conversation about what you're doing, what you need to do, what the training needs are, how do I support you to be your best self, which is a conversation we can have with everybody, really. So we need to think about the employee life cycle, and I think we've started over the last couple of years, I think, focusing on the attraction and recruitment. What's worrying me, and we put in the report this year, is thinking about progress as well, okay? We're seeing some ups and some downs, and what this says to me is that people have got really excited, there's lots of awareness, and now there's a bit of complacency going on, and even a bit of fatigue. And we've got to be careful, because it's lovely everybody's talking about it, but unless it translates into action, it's not going to be helpful. So you can start to see that website accessibility has gone up, and this is the interesting thing around legislation. So where there is compliance, even though I was going to say where there's compliance, then people comply, but they don't. So we've had the Equality Act 2010, so it's taken a long time, and people are not always compliant. But I think where there's compliance, there is a framework for saying I need to, I have to, as opposed to I want to. So we've got to be cautious about how do we move things from awareness into action now. I really do. 1 in 4 employers said they'd reviewed all their job descriptions. I bet they haven't. I think it's something we need to think about much more. How do we make job descriptions more inclusive? How do we translate that? I don't think it's easy because how many job descriptions have described your job?
In reality?
In reality,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we want to attract skills, and we want to attract people with the right skills, and they may not have had the opportunities, we need to really think about skills-based descriptions rather than a long list of things that somebody might have to do but never might do, but we might chuck it in there just in case, right? Which is the sort of way where we've been. This is good and not good. 1/3 of organisations gave questions in advance if somebody requested it. And this is the bit that I think is so important that we've got to move into. Everybody should have them. Why not? Right? And I'm still having those discussions when we're talking, which is, well, if they have them, they'll know what we're asking. Yes, Do you know what I mean? So I think this is really important that this is the business as usual, which is why not? Because if somebody has got the questions, and if they're prepared, then they want the job. It shouldn't be a mystery. And we need to avoid the sort of questions around what would you do if you went to the moon sort of questions as well, right? So I have no idea. Nearly 1 in 2 employers said they ask about neurodivergent conditions or onboarding. I don't know what they're asking, and I think this is a really important one as we move forward, because what I'm hearing from employers, and I think is where we need to go deeper next time, is that if we have a tick box which says, have you got ADHD, have you got dyslexia, have you got dyspraxia, have you got, and you tick 1. Well, most people won't have 1. Lots of people don't know what they have, because you don't know what you have, because it depends on the doors you've gone through. And there's going to be inequity. It's a power thing, right? So I think about my kids are neurodivergent, I wouldn't say, don't tick all of the boxes because you won't get through. Right, okay. And there's an inequity there. If I'm applying for a job, will I share that information if I don't feel confident to do so? So I think we have to think about how are we measuring. It's not like gender, right? It's different, and I think we need to explore this more. Good news is we're seeing employee resource groups come out, and I think this is really important, where we get champions on the ground supporting people signposting, because you'll see as we go through, signposting is a problem, okay? Peer mentoring, and we're seeing emerging peer mentoring programs but we've got to sort of sort it out a bit. So this is the first year we've sort of asked about that. I'm slightly concerned that we go, you're autistic, so you can be an autistic peer mentor with another autistic peer mentor, right? Because you know each other, right? We've got to be careful of those sort of matching approaches, really. But I think it's useful that we're starting to see peer mentoring. We need to explore it more. The technology sector had the highest rates of peer mentoring programs, which is interesting. Champions emerging, and I think this is something that in any company, all sizes, and we do this. The one thing is we're looking at across the sectors and sizes. We need more because 99% of companies are SMEs. How do we signpost to where resources are? The more we can signpost people to good information, the cheaper it is to get that information to lots of people. I think that's the other thing. How do we do it at scale? And this was 41% of organisations said they had no neurodiversity resources. First time we asked about tribunals. And I think that signposting, getting adjustments in a timely manner is going to make a big difference. So what are the responses? We saw good representation of people at different stages. You've got all of this in your piece. And a lot of people had been in work for a number of years. And we saw a good spread of people working at home, people working flexibly. So I thought that was quite good. The range of respondents, you're allowed to tick more than one thing, right? But, we're categorising, which comes with a lot of problems, as I've said to you. I think this is interesting. We're seeing a growing number of people with later diagnoses that are coming back and sort of saying, and we've got more females in this group that are responding. And I think that's interesting because it's around, what does this mean to me now, right? And I'm gaining that information. And also, I think many of those individuals are parents of neurodivergent children. And that cycle of I knew I was because my kid got diagnosed and now I'm hearing it. This is the first year in the report that we've looked at ageing, right? I'm particularly interested in ageing. But, because 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we thought you grew out of it. So I don't know what it was going to happen, but we were going to grow out of it, right? But we haven't. And I think now we've got 5 generations in workplaces. This is really important because neurodivergent traits are not a today, once and done, this is who you are. But in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you're very different people. Glasses, hearing aids, whatever it is, right? These are spy glasses, I'm just letting you know. 16% were over 50 years old. So who do you disclose? And I think this is this bit of people saying you need to share this information and it's nerve-wracking if you do, and when do you do so? And half the respondents had done so. Some had done it with peers, some had gone to the top to HR. 35% of respondents said they had no initial support when starting their jobs. And I think this is incredibly important. We get help and support, but it's a conversation, right? It's a conversation which is, what training do you need? Here's the job description. This is the job, not the job description. This is the actual job. Let's go through it. Let's talk about what's going to happen to you, how you're going to work. 14% said some initial support, and 8% said it was good to start, but then ended, right? Okay, so what we can see is that, and we saw this last year as well, that adjustments are sometimes taking time to happen. And what happens is you have a confidence-competence cycle there. I've come in great guns and I want to do the job. I just need a few adjustments. I need to understand what the job is. I don't understand what the non-worky rules are. Where do I go? What do I do? What do I do at lunch times, break times? Can I step away from my desk? What are the rules that people don't talk about? And they lose confidence. And then manager loses confidence in you because you are doing hard work but the wrong work, right? Because that communication hasn't happened. So we're still seeing, a number of people are really waiting a long time to get help. Same bits we're seeing in employers and employees, and this is the important to think about ERGs, champions, and HR having the information, is they don't know where to go for support. And this is practical stuff that we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. Just good practical advice, not by diagnosis, just functionally can really make a difference. So the signposting is a problem. Last couple of things, and then I will stop. You can see me ranting now. But parents as carers, 46% of respondents had a child with a diagnosis. And I think, Fazio, you talked about parents, and I think this is a bit that till last year, we hadn't asked about it. But the implications for your workforce, where you're a parent of an ND kid, and you just need flexibility at those times. And a lot of those parents are also sandwich parents. They're caring up and caring down. And in aging populations, that pressure on you can mean you choose to not progress, you choose to leave, and that cost of losing a swathe of people who've got amazing skills because of the caring. And we've got other issues in education and health at the moment going on, which is driving some of that at the same time. And a lot of them thought their kids were neurodivergent. Next year, but this year we've looked at progression, and I think this is the first time we're really thinking about it, because if you think about the employment life cycle, if we get people in, and it costs a lot to recruit people, keeping them is really important. And progression has got to be, how do we allow people to thrive and grow in an organisation? This was just some of the quotes that people had, and I think the stories that people tell are very powerful. I constantly feel like I have to explain myself to be heard, and even then I'm not taken seriously. This is where manager training is really important, that we think about microaggressions, we think about banter. I don't like banter, right? Because I think banter is something else, really, when people go, we love banter, right? When people say that, I'm thinking, what does that actually mean? Senior managers who display favoritism, toxic behaviours and dismissive attitudes from leaders make it impossible to progress. And I think we need to be thinking much more in that middle stage where you're growing your career. Are there different pathways? We're seeing that we're seeing it in big companies like Meta and other companies where they've got different pathways if you've got talent management and if you've got managerial skills. Because it's quite different to manage a team, but you might have amazing skills that you can progress in the company and be hugely useful, but you may not be a very good team manager. So do we need to think about progression in different sorts of ways? Even asking repeatedly, my specific needs were ignored, and lack of role clarity. And this goes back to communication. It really does. Do you know what you need to do, and has it been explained? It's hard to progress when you're unsure of what's expected of you. And I hear that a lot of the time, the intent. Okay, last couple of slides. Top responses, line manager support, access to training, and having allies. This is okay and doable, isn't it, if we know what we're doing? And the key recommendations are start at the top, build on awareness that it happens all the time, embed D&I as business as usual. Intersectional support is really important. That's why I love working with the City and Guilds Foundation, because this is not about people who are in certain sectors of the community and we're delivering and helping, but people who are at the edges of society who don't have an opportunity to get training and support. And many of those people are neurodivergent, but not got a label or diagnosis. Last thing is educating managers, progression pathways, and the lifespan approaches. And I think these are some of the things to developing recommendations. And in the report, like Fazio said, we put lots of recommendations in this year, lots of practical things, but we need more help to make sure that this is sustainable and this has an impact. So I'm going to hand back, and thank you very much, everybody.